And we're on. Episode 38. Welcome to the Enter Seeking podcast with myself, Martyn.
And me, Imogen.
So, it's the first one of 2025. Bit late to be saying Happy New Year because it's already March, but happy spring almost. I mean, we've got daffodils and things and crocuses and sunshine, so I'm quite happy with the way the year's going.
Yes. Yeah, finally winter broke.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's start off with...
some announcements?
Yeah.
Why don't you go?
Yeah, sure. So I took a bit of a break at the beginning of the year to really allow myself to fall into the gap and see what wanted to emerge in 2025. And so, yeah, there's been quite a few changes on my website and particularly to events. I am this year feeling to do more in-person events and also more group online events. So I've structured my months with that in mind. In particular, Mondays to Wednesdays, I'm doing a 30-minute Divine Light transmission group meeting. Most Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, that's 8 to 8:30. The first weekend of the month is going to be reserved for a 2-day weekend retreat most months. You can come to either days or both. And the third weekend of the month is going to be reserved for Sunday satsang, which is going to be a very fluid satsang. I think the last one I did was, I can't remember how long it was, almost 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. So that's a very fluid space, which I've been really enjoying. And then the fourth weekend of the month is so far reserved for in-person events. In particular, I'm now doing an in-person satsang monthly in Swansea, in the Gower. And that is 10 a.m. till 12 p.m. on the fourth Sunday of the month. This fourth weekend of the month, I'm actually doing 2 events. So for anyone that feels like making a weekend of it, I think they're going to complement each other really beautifully. So on the Saturday, I'm going to be doing an event with my dear friend Inula, and that one is called Divine Remembrance, Sound and Light for the Soul. And that's a 3-hour event, and it's going to be all sorts of juicy, yummy things in there. And then so the day after on the Sunday will be my monthly satsang, and they're at the same location.
Oh, all right. In the Gower.
Yeah, Temple Wellness Centre in Park Mill, Gower. And there's limited space. Temple Wellness is a really, really strongly beautiful, energetic space, but it is limited in size. Yeah. So tickets are a must for both of those. And then the other big news that our last podcast, which was last year, we'd just gone and visited a potential place for me to do an in-person retreat. Well, plot twist, Martyn is now going to be joining me in that retreat.
Yeah.
It is a 7-day in-person retreat called Embracing the Divine Within.
Yeah.
And it is at the beautiful St. Non's Retreat Centre.
I would just say joining you, meaning co-hosting.
Co-hosting, yes, absolutely.
No. Yeah.
Absolutely co-hosting. And so, we're going to do 7 days there. We've actually, it's a really small retreat. Yeah. And we actually only have 3 spots left. So if anyone feels called, we recommend sooner rather than later booking.
I'm actually quite pleased the way it's booked up, because it was in question. Okay, are we going to get enough sort of people in person to travel to the westerly, extremes of Wales, which
is about as far away from
everywhere.
You can get, but there's a really beautiful group gathering, and I think we're both really excited about it.
Yeah, totally, really excited. A bit. It wasn't on my bingo card, but there you go.
No. So really, really happy to be doing that together, and I have a feeling us working together in this way is going to be a really beautiful balance of energies. We've got an idea of the schedule, and I think it's going to be a really powerful retreat, actually.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's a real opportunity for transformation.
Yeah, really. And set in that such stunning location.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's like the energy there is I mean, it's one of my favorite places in the world, and it's just really a special spot.
Yeah, me too. I mean, St. David's is this holy, genuinely a holy city, smallest city in Europe, with a cathedral.
Is it Europe or the UK? I'm not sure.
I think in Europe. I think
really?
it's one of the small.
Okay.
I think, well, at least it's among those because it's got a cathedral. But it was always famously holy, where various popes have said that, 2 visits to St. David's is equal to 1 to Rome. So as a pilgrimage site, but the energy is pre-Christian. It's in the land somehow. And the well of St. Non's, which is right next to the retreat centre where we're holding this retreat, is a real spiritual place of power. The coast is just incredible. So yes, check out the website.
Yeah, so there's loads of updates on my website, so I recommend going and checking it out for yourself, just in case you don't remember, beyondimogen.com. And if you want to
I've got a few things going on now. Let's see. So I took the opportunity in the gap too to see what I wanted to do this year in terms of more public offerings. So I've got 2 regular groups going on now. One is every Thursday, or most Thursdays. Check out the website and the schedule, but mostly Thursdays at 8 p.m. till 8:30 UK time, and that's a silent meditation and transmission. So anyone can join in. It's on Zoom. Just go to the website for details. So that's a regular group on Thursdays, and the other monthly group I'm doing will be a longer. It'll be more satsang, so they'll maybe start with a guided meditation or a silent meditation, break out into some satsang and questions and answers. Definitely open to that, and just see again. I like the way that you've been treating your sort of longer weekend satsang groups as a more kind of fluid thing, and I think for me, stepping back into this, I think it'll be interesting to see who shows up and what they call forth. So, if there's little kind of interest, then it might be a shorter satsang. But if there's some real calling for some inquiry to get into it, I'm wide open for that. So that'll definitely be a longer meeting. So
when
that's on every second Saturday, right?
Yep.
Second Saturdays at 4 p.m. onwards. I think it'll be up to about 2 hours, but who knows? It might go longer or might go shorter. But 4 p.m. UK time every second Saturday. And just a note: the next Thursday group is tomorrow, and the next Saturday satsang group is on this Saturday, which I think is the 8th.
Yeah. And just to give context for those listening outside of the timeline, it's currently the 5th of March.
5th of March today, yes, indeed. So the 8th of March is the next second Saturday satsang.
Yeah.
That's very
That's
very alliterative, isn't it? Okay. So everyone welcome. Look forward to seeing you there. What else? Well, the retreat is coming up in person. Really looking forward to that. That'll might it'll set the tone, because I love this idea that we get to do in-person events together.
Yeah.
Such as like that. We started off doing satsang together in the earlier days.
Yeah, we're looking 7-8 years ago now. We were doing all of this very much in step.
Yeah.
Group meetings, and who knows, they may come back as well. But we've sort of naturally gone our separate ways, as you've gone more inward and I've gone more outward in many ways.
Sure.
But I think 2025 we're both coming back together in some ways.
Yeah, for some events and for some things like I think the podcast has really set the tone for that.
Oh, totally.
That we can both, we both have. Let's face it, we're both coming from the same place.
Yeah.
Speaking and acting from the same source. But our flavors, let's say, became obvious that they were a bit different.
Yeah.
And each of us have our own fragrance and flavor and ways of pointing
And approaches as
and
well.
approaches. And so that's beautiful. And it's been interesting to see then how, when we do come back together to have these conversations, that which we never stopped, to be fair, they were always in private. So coming back together to have these conversations, we would always be, checking in with each other in this really deep, beautiful level.
It's sort of interesting because, obviously we have been having these gaps in podcasts longer than we ever anticipate, to be fair. But the in between, we never stop talking. We never stop having these long conversations. I mean, there's barely a day that goes by that.
Well, it's the level of life we live at, really,
Yeah.
isn't it? I mean, once that level becomes established, then everything is in the light of that, and so everything is seen, considered, experienced in that light.
Yeah, everything's included.
Everything's included. Yeah,
it's sort of interesting because, like, in many ways, I think of my life as less spiritual in terms of a category, but everything has become
that
from and as that.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about this on the podcast before, but whether you're sort of talking about the shopping that you need to go to the supermarket for or anything else, it's all sort of from that place and often leads to some very interesting discussions and explorations.
Well, I think that's it's a beautiful idea to explore the all-inness, the all-encompassing, ubiquitous nature of, let's say, the awakened being or living the way. Nothing is excluded from that. And for me, I distinctly remember a time after the big shift that it kind of dawned on me, there's no spirituality. No. There's only this, but this is all spiritual.
Yes.
This is spirit.
Of the same nature, yeah.
So you walk in that and live in that, and that flowing aliveness.
We've been having a lot of discussions in the last few weeks about everything in life being for you.
Yeah.
And in light of what we're just speaking about here, it's like it's no longer a category of this is good and this is bad in terms of like this is good spirituality and this thing here is just like something it's a mistake and is the ego and is about identification and all that. And it's like there comes to a point where, and this is the discussions we've been having, the view of this is all wisdom, this is all learning, this is all the divine, this is all the expression of consciousness, of life, guiding you home, guiding you through this experience we call life, to come to a deeper relationship, communion, unity with the nature of existence.
Yeah, I think it's very easy, and I think one of the great, I think perhaps the in some ways the heart of what the work becomes from taking someone from a dualistic experience of life to a unified experience of life is this. You've addressed it so beautifully, that this inclusion. And you're right, in many ways, so much of the work is identifying where someone is habitually, through a conditioned response, excluding some part of their experience or identity, saying not that, and it's no, this too, until the point where it is evident that nothing is excluded. There is only a oneness of experiencing and reality. But the work, let's say, is to go, you're excluding that. Can we invite that into our experience, integrate it into ourselves, welcome it as a part of our wholeness. And so, where we can see where the problems arise and often it's, and I've just been writing about this and reading about this and really, really pondering on this, this idea that it's the old story, when we're having a difficult experience, whether, some afflictive, trouble of all sorts, fear and grief and anger and whatever it is, whether it might be
Suffering in
coming
whatever
from
form.
however we frame that, coming to recognize what you opened with, that, this is for me too. This isn't something I've just got to get through, or it's something I have to accept just simply because it's a fact, and accept it in some sort of begrudging neutrality, perhaps. But it is actually...
It's the divine at work.
It's the divine at work. And this, I like this, I wrote this week because I've been reading and reflecting on this beautiful book, which is really speaks to this. It's from a Christian mystical perspective, but it's very much the idea that the moment is ordained for us. Like your moment. Oh, what's the book? It's called Abandonment to Divine Providence by Jean-Philippe de Caussade. Yeah, it's quite a famous book in among certain circles. It's really beautiful, and there's a premise there, and the premise is that of all the moments that could be, this very moment, of all the moment that you are experiencing right now, of all the possibilities, this has been determined and ordained and given to you for you. And it's that understanding of now, whether you understand that in a theistic way, and God, let's say, has provided this moment, or whether it's just a deep understanding of the supreme intelligence of nature, call it self, call it God, call it whatever. Call it life, is this is the perfect moment for you, whether you... how can I put this? Even the difficult bits. It's easy to accept sunshine and flowers. It's great. But when it gets tricky, then it's very easy to slip into, rejection, avoidance, resistance. And that's where our suffering is. It's in resistance. And a lot of the time that resistance doesn't even arrive because life's okay.
It's interesting because, obviously often people come to me for this very issue. And like just sitting with someone yesterday around this very topic. And it's very interesting to me because when you actually go looking with curiosity to the very thing they're resisting, what happens is you bring light to that, and they go, almost always the response, first and foremost, it's very scary to go towards the thing you think you need to be running in the opposite direction of. But once you get past that gateway of fear, what is almost always found is, this isn't what I thought it was. And that's an interesting thing for me, because we, in our minds, build up this certainty of this thing that we don't want to go towards.
Right.
And it creates a solid form of that in the imagination, a belief, a sense of, no, this is not good.
And
this
it reinforces itself through your aversion to it.
Exactly. This is not for me. This is bad. This is a mistake of life.
Right.
And
exactly that.
When you can sort of walk someone gently through, and this is something people can do themselves, but often it helps to be handheld to begin with, because it's very scary to walk towards something you've spent your whole life resisting. And so having someone to walk you through that, support you walking yourself through that, it's like you have an anchor point to not be lost in the fear of it. And it allows you to move towards it gently, curiously, openly. And what's fascinating to me is we rarely find the thing that they thought it was in the way they thought it was. And actually what is found in actuality is the ability to meet that. And that's where it comes around to this topic of it's for you. It's not life giving you something you can't meet, you can't handle, you can't bear witness to, there isn't the support of being held in that. It's actually the very opposite. It's like, oh, you've been running away from the very thing that actually gets you to the point you want, which is freedom and joy with life, is often through the very thing you've been running away from. Yeah. And so it becomes a sort of a gilded cage of I can't go there. And when people find they can, it's like, oh.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, talking about this attitude of surrender, which is in a sense an attitude of faith, but then that faith then is it's a chicken and egg thing. Is that faith born of the experience of the for you-ness, or is it does it lead towards that? I think it's both. I think it's a bit of both. And so this attitude of surrender then, or abandonment, which I really love. I love that word, which adds a sort of a, I think of a more Sufi. This beautiful the abandonment to the bliss and love of the divine presence. It's that it leads to a more a richer experience. We talked and I wrote a little bit about an Orthodox elder. I can't remember which could have been Paisos or Porphyrios. Anyway, he listed these ways in which one responds to like an injustice, let's say, and I in the last piece I wrote was something about we can translate as to say how we relate to an affliction, whether that's internal or external, something like that. The first is stage one is a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to it. You lash out, you run away, you hide, you try to drink or take drugs or whatever. Anything to get away from or react to. You can't let yourself experience it at all. And it's reactive, pure reactive. And then there's a second stage, which is ahead of it a bit, which is you're not reacting to it, but it's resentment. I think it's resentment. You're in your heart.
Yeah, there's a coldness in your heart towards that experience.
And you're mumbling. You resent it. You're in a victimhood state. You're in a blaming state.
You may have a sense of I accept this, but it's not true acceptance.
No.
I accept this begrudgingly because I have no choice to.
Exactly.
And it's so in the heart there's a feeling of closedness towards this.
Right.
Even though on the surface level you may, fine, I accept that this is here.
Yeah, but I don't
accept
like it.
that I'm going through this affliction.
Why should I have this?
Yeah.
But you're not acting out, so that's something.
Yeah.
The third stage is a sort of a neutrality towards it, which is to say you're even-minded about it, let's say. You're not, a difficult emotion or a difficult situation or a difficult person or something is, you're having these difficult experiences, but you're, okay, that's fine. Yeah. It comes and goes. And, that is quite an advanced place to be. It's equanimity.
It doesn't seem to touch the sides in the same way.
No, and it's an even-mindedness, an evenness of being that allows. So it is very advanced, and as I wrote, you see this a lot in meditative traditions. In fact, I'd argue that in some ways it's almost the goal of it, to be entirely even-minded. And I mean, in the Gita it talks what are the signs of an established, enlightened being, let's say. Even-minded in pleasure and pain, loss and gain. That's the idea, even-mindedness. And it's a beautiful place. But to me, it has a bit of a neutral... It's that stage that the elder identified there, calls it indifference. So it's easy.
And it's often characterized, I think it's the first early stages of awakening often would report that. And it's characterized by a sort of an emptiness of being. There's a sense of vastness, a sense of emptiness that is not touched by and afflicted by the comings and goings
the vicissitudes of life.
And, but I agree with you that it's not necessarily the maturity.
I don't think
of
it's the
path.
final
Yeah.
stage.
It's funny
Yes.
because I didn't realize that until I've experienced that for myself.
Exactly.
Like I look back, 5, 6, 7, 8, even longer years ago now, and I see that that's where I was, and I held that up as the highest thing.
Yeah.
Of like to not be touched by life.
Yeah.
And actually where I find myself is the opposite of that
Yeah.
now. It's like, no, to be fully touched by
Yes.
life. And there's, I don't want to
spoil
your ending there.
No. So the fourth stage from from this perspective, and I tend to concur, is how did he? What was? I'm trying to think what the actual word is. Joy. It's joy. Yeah. It's joy whatever comes,
Yep.
right? If good stuff comes, as we judge good stuff, joy. If bad stuff comes, joy. Because we know in our deepest part of ourselves that whatever comes, whether it's really beautiful and easy to accept or really difficult, challenging, pain, grief, whatever, we accept it with joy because we understand it to be the gift as well. And that this idea coming from again the beautiful idea in the abandonment book is that that the outer events that we see are really a shadow of the deep inner work of the soul that continues going on, and that whatever's given at this outer level is in fact a shadow of the deep work of the divine happening in the depths of our spirit.
Well, it's love to me. It's like you speak of joy there, and the word I feel in my being is the love of life.
Yeah.
And I see with so many people who go on the spiritual path is there comes to a point where it's a very beautiful space, a peaceful space, but it's a very empty space where somehow there's no engagement in life anymore. They're in the way that it used to be. With family, with friends, with life, with the highs and lows of life. It's like somehow there's an insulation against all of that at a certain point. And that is a very a recognized high state of being to be in that empty space of the self. Or
right,
in Buddhism,
let's say
no
a sort of a voidness, let's say, or neutrality. Is that what you're...
Yeah. But there's something that happens whereby as the embodiment of the divine takes hold, I do think there's a coming back into life that starts to happen, and a real falling in love with life again. I speak with people sometimes where they've got the peace aspect of it, but they haven't yet found the bliss and the joy of life, the love of life yet.
They're sort of still in a sort of a proverbial cave, aren't they?
Totally,
It's like,
totally.
I think Ajahn Shanti talked about hiding out in the absolute.
Yeah.
That you get this, identify this ground of blissful being. But actually, it doesn't always come across as blissful. It can be a kind of a neutral. Arguably, as you come to know that more, it does show up as bliss and love.
Yeah, but it's a silence. It's a stillness. It's
a part,
beautiful,
isn't it, from all the activities of life, and is almost denying of the activities of life.
I would say that bliss that you're talking about there is the bliss and the joy of that stillness.
The resting in the quietness.
Yeah. And so it can be a bliss, but not in a loud way, but in a very like an okayness with life, a contentment with life, a peace with life, no longer at war with life, but there's somehow a slight apartness from life still, and so I think this, just to circle back round slightly, this thing of it's all for you is what comes about when there is an inclusion of it all, when there is a recognition of, all of it is an expression of the divine,
not just
it.
this apartness of the silent ground, but all of the content. And I think that, and also, sort of coming into the establishment of that silent ground, one could want to hang out there, let's say, and feel that that's the end of the story. But sooner or later, the relative nature of our also-ness is is has to be contended with.
Yes.
And we've talked about this at length before, I believe, but this movement then is to include until, and we in a sense we're talking about different stages of awakening, different stages of integration, that this apartness, which is itself an awakened state, it hasn't quite found its fullness in the full inclusion of the singularity, the non-duality of subject and object, all included as one. And and this sort of ability, or coming to this place of like true abandonment, like a total full acceptance of all of this reality, is founded upon this ground of being, which can itself include everything. But there's work to be done there, right? To identify and bump into those places where we're conditioned to not embrace it.
Massively.
But on the basis of our, let's say, establishment in that ground of being, that then can be included, because we are vast and we can contain multitudes.
Yes. Yeah. I think both of us have been on a bit of an adventure recently.
Yeah.
In this vein, I'd say. I mean, for me, I've been sort of talking about this for a while, but I see, like, you and I, our conversations in recent months and weeks have really been hitting into the richness of just how much all of this is the divine providence.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And I think probably in part you've been really getting into your Christian mystics and more orthodox kind of viewpoints, and it's been sort of an interesting difference in our discussions, I find, because it is very much more centered around how the totality of this experience it contains all of those multitudes, and that as long as there is any sort of a pushing away of some aspect, some expression of life, that there's a sort of a missing the point of that this is one singular experience of life.
I think it's really, I mean, I look at the Buddha and the first turning of the wheel. I mean, where he came in his first sort of teachings. I mean, basically the first words that came in regard to those teachings is there is suffering, dukkha, there is suffering. And it's interesting that becomes the first thing that he speaks about, because he's really putting his finger on the essence of the problem. Yeah. How do we deal with the problem of suffering? Totally. Because let's say, and I know some people misinterpret that. It's a bugbear of mine that people do sort of misinterpret that statement. There is suffering. To say life is suffering, and even luminaries such as Jordan Peterson holds to this position. It frustrates me when he goes, "Oh, life is suffering." The Buddha, no, he didn't. But said there is suffering. It's a part of life. Suffering is a part of life. And it is very much woven into the fabric of conditioned life. And it's dukkha meaning unsatisfactory. You won't find your satisfaction within the field of the conditioned field, the relative field of being. Okay. But it's just interesting to me how we named suffering. And, whenever someone will come, say, to a session or a group or seeking, usually, not entirely, but usually, well, actually entirely, they're there because there's some part of their experience that they consider to be suffering. And that's it. That's our problem. And without those exclusions, that part that we can't find ourselves to include, that we consider to be suffering, without that, there would be no need for any sort of spiritual path. Life is great, So that's, for me, that's where it's important to deal with how and why, and how do we relate to those pieces that we want to resist, avoid, exclude. And I see how beautifully you're doing that in your work, and what's beautiful to me to watch is how you've really made that your own, in the sense that you have your own vernacular around that. Is vernacular the right word? Your own individual voice on how you address this so beautifully. And we're kind of different in this. I know you are informed by various, well, to some extent, teachings and teachers or whatever, that may be in your view peripherally, but you're really coming from this beautiful natural place of wisdom where you're.
Yeah, it's experiential for me, mainly because I'm not a big reader or someone that has studied I'm a very poor student of the wisdom traditions. It's rare that I get through a book or anything like that. That's just been my way, has been through my own sort of tooth and nail experience, and through my experience with working with others. I think that's.
Yeah, exactly. But what I find fascinating, for me, and this is a continued part of my journey throughout life, and I'm always interested to see how different places, people, traditions, schools, whatever, how they speak of this.
I love watching you go down those rabbit holes.
And for me, it's all what's been beautiful, let's say post-awakening was exploring different things now in the light of that awakened mind, and to be able to go, how does this comport, how does this look to not just to each other but to my experience, how can I and so it's been interesting going through many different traditions, and just curiously saying, are they speaking what I know, are they speaking from this place, and how effectively do these traditions, and in what different ways do these traditions point back to the ineffable being that we are. So that's been fascinating for me, and it continues to be. And I don't think that'll ever change. That curiosity, see just the diversity of expression. Spiritual expression, but to me it's like how effectively and to what degree do they point back to this reality that is experiential ultimately.
They can be quite different and seeming contradictory in their expressions, and like, to me, the way that I view it is these are all different facets of the same gem.
Yeah.
It's the same gem. It's pointing to the same thing ultimately, but the expression of it and the emphasis of it and the way in which it is talked about, let's say, can be quite vastly different. And if you look at, what's that famous... I'm terrible. You're the guy for this. I am terrible at remembering these. But that thing of like philosophers all see a difference.
Meister Eckhart.
That's it, yeah.
Theologians may quarrel, but the mystics of the world all speak the same language.
Yes.
I love that as one of my favorite lines, because that really puts a point in it. Because a lot of what I've been sort of looking into, in some sense, is some theology, and. It's definitely, it has its, for me personally, it has its value, but without the lived mystical insight, without the kind of, the numinous reality, it's just speculative. And I'm not saying it all is. There's something in that, coming to understanding or kind of reasoning your way to places, but it has to be rooted in this experience, this of reality that is available to us, and that's why I'm drawn so deeply, like in the Christian traditions, for example, to the contemplatives and the mystics. Not always quite the same thing, though. Actually, as I've come to see that you can be a mystic without necessarily being a contemplative as such. So
can you I know this is a very difficult question to answer, but I think it might be helpful.
Yeah.
Can you define, broadly speaking, the difference between a...
So for me right now, I can compare, say two represented two different threads. So one is the and I'm also interested to hear if other people have some views on this. Actually, I'd be very interested to hear if anyone wants to sort of reach out, ask questions, or make comments. So one of the more beautiful aspects of Christian mysticism I really deeply admire is represented, let's say, by something like the Cloud of Unknowing. We did a piece on that.
I think it was episode 7, if I'm not mistaken.
Beautiful book. I can't remember quite when it was written, but it was written by a monastic who was really speaking about how to approach this contemplative place, this place of silence, of deep communion with God. Meister Eckhart could be said.
It was medieval, I believe.
Yeah. It was an anonymous author there, but Meister Eckhart talking about the ground and the way to understand, but also approach the ground. A very, very practical way of, approaching communion and union with the divine in the silence of our own being. So it's very much as analogs to the kind of Eastern meditative traditions that we're aware of. Okay, so that contemplative tradition focused on silence, right? The other one, or another one that I've come into is represented by this other book I was reading, and I wouldn't say the Abandonment of Divine Providence, and I wouldn't say that it was contemplative, but it's more about, because it's not so much about silence. It's not about the apprehension and abidance in the silent self or the silent or the ground. It's about how you, in every moment, attend to it, how you are in each moment. It brings the focus straight to the present moment.
So that's like a mystic too.
It's mystic,
exactly.
But it's not contemplative. It's mystical.
The mystic is how the interaction with the moment is seen as the divine.
It's seen as every part of the moment. Exactly. It's the divine. It's the divine. It's the divine, and it's finding good relation, the right relation. In some sense, I might be using the word wrong. It's more sort of tantric. It's like how you attend to the moment, how you're energetically, let's say, and conceptually, intellectually, and responding to the moment. What can you surrender to this moment, whatever's being presented to you, whatever being presented, and accept it as the will of God, the will of God, the will of the divine. Another way, the spontaneous, natural unfoldment of of natural law in the present moment. The self, what do we see in the Vedic science? Self-interacting dynamics of the unified field, whatever, all occurring in this one single living moment. And so this is about getting out of the way of that and accepting it, abandoning oneself to this unfolding.
One small self to the recognition of the big self.
Yeah, exactly. And I really love this. In this book, he speaks of the sacrament of the present moment. I mean, like
juicy.
That this moment is sacramental. It's sacred. It's not something on whatever shows up for that. So you're a tough. Yes, you take it with joy. So using this, I mean, these are different. Hit my mic. Using, I'm even looking. I'm seeing these. This is why I love these different traditions, because this guy is very much a medieval French. I think he was a bishop. Whereas these stages of dealing with affliction or injustice, I mean, that's from the Orthodox tradition. So they're there, but also these themes, this underlying pattern of this is found in East, West, everywhere. This surrender to the moment, just abandon oneself, and in doing so you dissolve. It's kenosis.
It's again those inner teachings that are talking to those that are much more intimate with what is being spoken of. It's not just a set of rules to follow for a person to follow. It's at that point where the recognition of, I am not this small person only. I am the divine acting out and expressing as this human. And so it's those inner teachings that are recognized through direct experience of that, in whatever language you want to couch it in. But it is the recognition of, to use Christian terms, I and the Father am one.
Yeah. But to get there, one has to progressively, let's say, surrender oneself to that divine will before one finds out that there's nothing left but the divine will, that you're dissolving by surrendering to that will. You're, in fact, dissolving the small person.
The notion that it was any other way.
Canonically, and then discovering, oh, I and the Father are one. Exactly. The ground of God and the ground of the soul are the same ground.
Exactly. And so it's at that point that final veil that says, I am separate from God. I can be in good relation with God, but fundamentally I am not that.
Yes.
That is dissolved then into the recognition of, oh, I am that.
I don't remember who said it, but one of the sort of early church fathers said, and it's a famous maxim or whatever statement, that the idea that God became man so that man could become God. So this notion of theosis, which is to say unity with the divine, is fundamental to that. It's not just getting good relation to God, sure, but ultimately it's a unity, it's a divinization where we are partaking of the same essence and nature. So there we are, and you know that's spoken of so profoundly in the East, in Vedanta, in the Upanishads, and you know that notion of the singularity of being, the non-duality of what is. We are that. You know, reading these various Gitas, and I find it very uplifting to find that in the Christian traditions, because the reason why I'm even exploring these different traditions is to say this reality that I find myself in, as it has to be, you know, this is being, this is the nature of being. It has to be in these traditions somehow, and so it's beautiful to find it. It's beautiful to go, that's pointing to it. Because I remember when shortly after I awakened, that I remember I was sitting with a teacher who I'd been with for, you know, a long time, and really, you know, before that I was really drinking up the pointings, and then the shift happened, and it became so self-evident that, oh, I am what's being pointed to here. We all are what is being pointed, but that experience of like, oh, I don't need a pointing to this anymore. I am it. It's self-evident that I am that.
Well, what was once a riddle that they would be pointing to, and you not, and missing, you know, keep pointing and you keep missing, and eventually that shift happens, that flip happens, and you realize that they were pointing to and from that place, and you are that place. Yeah,
we are that, but became so self-evident, and it was like, oh, you know, and that phrase that came from that was, my own silence here is more eloquent than any pointing could be. Now, it's been interesting I wrote this a couple of days ago. It's like for the last 10 years, I've been trying to reverse engineer what the hell happened to get to that, right? And then I came to the conclusion, of course, it's actually impossible to reverse engineer grace. Because ultimately
try as we might,
you can't. But you know, that's.
But it's interesting you say that, because it's almost like that reverse engineer could be looked in a different manner. Oh, just spilt water everywhere.
Not quite everywhere.
It could be looked at in a different manner. It could be looked at in this trying to come to terms with your view and your influences pre-awakening, and your view and your experience post-awakening, and see how they intellectually as well as experientially, how they match up, and then being able to abandon the falsity that was ever in your belief system beforehand.
Well, interesting there. I think what happened after, like in the few years after the shift, you and I both were teaching, to some degree. I was more to start with, but
I wasn't for the first few years.
That's right,
all,
but I was immediately sort of was starting to, I was writing about it online and people were coming and I was doing the odd sessions here and there and we were, helping people come to sort of clarity around this stuff. But at a certain point, even though that was fine and that had actually some real value, and I look back at my early writing now as well, those first couple of years, it's not wrong, let's say, but it does have more of the flavor of the kind of influences that got me to the shift. And at some point I went, I need to I felt myself going into a more self-reflective mode again, to go, okay, this is great. More contemplative mode. Yeah. And so for about, I don't know, a good while now, since probably 2020, it really happened. I went, I'm done. I'm not going to do any teaching. I'm not going to do any groups. I'm just going to write every day as a form of...
Right when COVID sort of came, the lockdown.
Just before, we didn't even know COVID was coming.
It's hilarious. I saw, this is totally as an aside, but I saw like one of those memories that came up like 5 years ago, pictures of people queuing up for toilet paper. And, I'm like, wow, that was 5 years ago. But basically the same time that you...
Yeah.
It was into your cave and your
I was already sort of going that way.
And
then the end of 2019, I was like, I'm just going to write every day now. I'm just going to go into reflective mode. And what I mean by write is what I would call a contemplative writing, that I would really sort of sit in the silence and listen and see what came from that, and be ready for that to capture what my insight, what my process was. And so this, I mean, it's
not for anyone, but...
No, not for anyone really, although I did post a bunch at that time. But it was really just this need to self-reflect and see what my voice was in all of this. And that's changed as time's gone on.
And I would say, you say you've posted a bunch. You did post a bunch, but compared to how much you wrote, you posted a fraction.
but because it was more, because it was more of a practice, a reflective practice, a contemplative practice, and it still is, even though I will write and share stuff out, but it's more about my own process and actually my own exploring the nature of reality from, this.
We've both been doing that in different ways, and it's been quite interesting and quite fruitful for us to then come together in these kinds of discussions, because we are coming at it from quite different sides of the spectrum, in that you're coming in it from a silent contemplative way, and I'm coming at it from
much more active in the world, dealing with people,
and actually I would say more tantric, more mystical, in that sort of like the energetics of it and the experience of it and all of that as well. But actually it's the same things we come to.
Well, because we're both living it every day.
Totally. It's always quite fascinating and also quite fascinating how themes seem to come up despite ourselves, like I've been speaking to a bunch of people and there's themes that come up, and I speak to you and I've just been writing about that, and we have absolutely,
I know.
We haven't had any communication about that prior to it, and after the fact sort of swapping notes in that sense about what we've been exploring, and going, my God, this is, how many times has it happened that we've been going, that's exactly what I've just been exploring myself, either in writing or in sessions. And it's really fascinating to me that the collective has sort of this
emergent themes.
Yeah.
No, so, I'm sitting there in my, cave and really exploring the sort of the inner fabrics, tissues and structures, let's say, through writing. And, mostly it doesn't reach, because I'm not really a writer as such. I'm just, reflecting and exploring the inner nature. So I don't know.
Lost the thread.
Well, just this comment really on. Sometimes I think, I should just pick a lane, if I'm gonna, but I love the different expressions, and I love it when, some insight here is here, and then I see that expressed in one tradition. Then in another tradition, you go, and it may be in different ways, but it's pointing to the same underlying pattern, this transcendental pattern of reality, of nature, the dynamics of what is.
And I find like you can feel the sort of, it's almost like pieces of the puzzle fitting into place in your being, in your expression, in your experience. When you hear another expression that actually is using completely different language and completely different ways of pointing, but somehow there's a resonance that happens in the body, in the mind, in the being itself that goes, yes. And the transmission of that is carried through. And it's the way I would describe it is it's like something is enlivened, like a truth. And I see it in people I speak with when I say something, and they can feel it in their own being. They can feel the truth of it. And you can see that in other writings and texts and traditions. Yeah. You can feel the truth of it in your being. It enlivens the very thing that is being pointed to, even if you've never been exposed to it, or you've been exposed to it in a completely different manner of speech and language. But somehow there's an aliveness that is felt in the system when the system meets the same truth.
A true resonance of, it's a bit like, for me, there's a Zen idea of the finger pointing at the moon. And the moon being truth, pointing to the nature of being, the nature of self, and the finger's pointing there. And of course, if you're getting it wrong, you're looking at the finger. Go, no, don't mistake the finger for the moon, which is to say, don't mistake, let's say, the teachings for what the teachings are trying to get you to apprehend. So, and there's any number of ways to point at a moon, and the moon remains the same. And so I love the richness of these expressions. And sometimes there are subtleties and nuances that are present in one tradition that aren't present in another tradition, pointing to some richness there that might be found more readily in one tradition than another tradition. And the different traditions give voice to maybe different, as you say, different aspects of that gem. Different facets can be expressed, and in some traditions, some things aren't expressed at all, or not as well as clearly as other traditions.
Well, and I think it also speaks to this. I mean, we've spoken quite extensively about provisional truths and absolute truths, like provisional teachings and absolute teachings, and how you can be speaking to something on a relative level that seems to be contradictory with something else on a relative level. But when you transcend that relative level into deeper truths, into subtler realms, there's where the differences start to subside into the recognition of the sameness of it. And so while you can have things on the relative surface level seemingly completely contradictory to each other, if you follow the thread of either of those things, they lead to the same place, even though on the surface level it remains that they are seeming completely contradictory to each other.
And I think it's exactly right. But I think it's really beautiful as well that my view is that there's more richness to come from. Or I think we're living in a very interesting time. So although the world is in many ways dark and full of trouble, at the same time I'm seeing more awakened souls than I've ever recognized or imagined. Could be that people are out there, established in their own being, living out, shining out, and offering up their own expressions of that. And because look, all spiritual traditions, let's say whatever you want to call them, started from first person recognitions of a reality that then become expressed, and then Other people might follow that. Other people might be led to a similar experience. Religions and traditions and all grow around ultimately the enlightened view, the view, the divine within.
They can be distorted from that as well.
Well, right. So the clarity of that view tends to give rise, and then people follow it. That's why it's so important for me that really a tradition to be really worth its salt, in my eyes, my humble eyes, is that it needs to lead to the experience, the ineffable in the heart of your own being, so that you know your identity with that. Otherwise, if it's disconnected from that, and it's just sort of faith based on reason, I mean, there's something in that, and I think if that's as much as one can get, fine. But there's a truth to be apprehended here. And it's within our own experience, and most of the traditions really point to that. But not, again, there's an outer and there's an inner. There's an exoteric teaching and there's an esoteric teaching, let's say.
And the esoteric teachings are often unrecognizable to those on the exoteric path, and unseen. And so because their viewpoint, it's like they may be being said. I remember this in my own experience, like of hearing a teacher say something and then going back years later from the awakened viewpoint and going, oh, they were saying this all along. And so it's not that it's not being said, it's that it's eyes are unable to hear. Eyes are unable to hear, of course. The ears are unable to hear it. The ears are unable to hear it.
Well, that's what I said. I think Jesus said, let those with ears hear and those with eyes see. It's like...
It's that. And so those esoteric teachings are found everywhere, but they are not overtly seen by everyone. But when you come closer to that in your own heart, that's where they become apparent to you and they become known to you. And so, a tradition or a teacher or any of these things can be expressing that, but it's only when you're ready to hear it that you actually are able to take that in and see where it is being pointed to.
I mean, we say esoteric, so it's a strong word, esoteric, and I use those words, and they're not wrong. But it's the simplicity of the inner work, really, and I think, and it needn't be such a big leap for someone who might be, let's say, outwardly observant of some teaching or religion to, when they're ready, you're right, when they're ready, sort of naturally drop into and recognize these teachings and pointings that point to, the way to commune with, the self, with God, the divine, however you want to call it, life, the ground, it is through an turning within.
It is. Ultimately, it's very simple. It's not easy, though, because you have to get past all of the conditionings that says it's not that simple, that it's not found within.
But we're always being called to it, I believe.
Oh, absolutely.
But, and everything in their own time. And I see the, let's say, the providence of the divine always at play here, right? The will of God is ubiquitous, undeniable, and universal. So you kind of trust it all.
Yeah, it's all a symptom guiding you to that. I do feel the same silence that we seek, the same divine that we seek is seeking us.
Exactly.
And yes, it may look like those that, you could judge those, they're not on a spiritual path. But actually, I would say we're all that. And everything that occurs to us is, and every happening, every action, every thought, every emotion, every affliction, every experience of life is the divine seeking us out to be found within.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I put a note on Substack yesterday. It was something like about how this very moment, is the most evolved moment. Yeah. It is more advanced and evolved than any moment that went before it, and we ourselves are the most further along than we've ever been. And the next thing we do, therefore, will be the best that we can conceive of or manage based on environment, biology, and conditioning. Where's the free will in any of that, right? And so it's all grace, grace, grace. And this is where I say we can use words like grace, we can use, I don't know, there's all words and different ways of naming this pattern, this structure of reality that is.
And even, you know, so I think everyone can relate to the feeling of, oh, I've gone backwards. I was going ahead and now I've gone backwards. And in my eyes, that's never what's going on.
No.
Like, yes, you may be finding yourself in a pattern that feels very familiar, but who you are is different. The moment, even if you're meeting the same sort of pattern again, you yourself, the light that you are, the experience of consciousness that you are, the being that you are, is experiencing that completely uniquely. Even if it looks like a carbon copy and, oh, I've gone back to, I'm re-identified, I've gone backwards, I thought I was doing so well. It's like, it's almost like life has to keep spiraling deeper and deeper into that experience to allow that recognition to penetrate into all aspects of it. And so to me, we're never going backwards. We're always going forwards. Even if we're experiencing something seemingly carbon copy, it feels like, but it's not. You look at it, it's never carbon copy. It's never exactly the same, because you yourself cannot be exactly the same as you were 5 seconds ago. It's just not possible.
What did Maharshi used to say? The past is a lower state of consciousness,
Lesser
or something,
evolved,
lesser state of consciousness, lesser evolved. Well, the same thing. So we're always moving forward, and in a sort of these sort of inevitable, and we use a more sort of Christian term, ordained. Well, it's not Christian actually. Ramana Maharshi was all about whatever must be will be, whatever can't be won't be. I'm paraphrasing here. It is all ordained, so you won't be able to avoid what must come, and you won't be able to bring about what can't come. There's an ordaining intelligence to this whole reality.
Which brings us right back to the beginning of this podcast, which is, it is all for you.
It's all for you.
It's all for you.
Yeah, exactly.
All of it. There are no mistakes.
Yeah.
There are wisdom learnings. There are lessons. There is growth. There is experience that can be challenging and suffering in that experience. But it is all for you. It is all for you. And it is all grace in that way.
Exactly. So
welcome it all into your heart.
Abandon yourself to it. Just
welcome it all. Let it all be.
Yeah.
See that every aspect of being is held not as something you have to do, but as a description of something you are.
And I think there's this, we talked about these, as I identified, these two different streams of, let's say, mysticism, for want of a better word. One is a more of a kind of a contemplative meaning silence, into that silence, kind of analog of a more Eastern awareness, nature, dropping into the ground, appreciating and recognizing your silent source. There's that. And then this other one, I'm not sure I'm using it right, tantric, which is much more energetic in the present moment, surrendering to that, identifying and allowing your resistance to that to fall away. They're different. It's right. They're different.
Well, you could broadly, as you're speaking,
but they're complementary, is what I was going to say. Yeah. As
you're speaking, I'm hearing the difference between the attention on the emptiness of life and the attention on the fullness of life, and they are one and the same ultimately.
Yeah.
Emptiness is fullness and fullness is emptiness, but it's sort of almost like a different way into that. It's maybe a temperamental difference into that. But it's both lead to the other. They're just as rich. They're just
there's so many, as you say, as we could say, Dharma gates. There's so many approaches. There are many approaches as there are people. And
absolutely, and none is wrong. And actually, you can go through many seasons of your life as well, where there's something that is very appropriate at a time, and you're very drawn to, and you resonate deeply with, and sort of sets your heart on fire, you could say. And then another time, another season comes in, and you go, oh, actually, this is the flavor of this moment, and it's not to negate what has gone before and to diminish it as less than, but it is also to recognize that we do shift our focuses and our attentions, and what is appropriate for the next level of learning, the next level of where we must go.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, let's stop there. Thank you so much for everyone who's listening, and hope you enjoy, and it's been nice to get back in front of the mic together. Okay, that's it.
Until next time.
Bye for now.